This is Kyle McCord, and you're listening to Austin, Felix, and Matt on the Devy Debate.
Welcome to the Devy Debate. All right, boys. Are we ready to debate? Austin, you tweeted something, girl. You tweeted your running back rankings. Explain yourself.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast. You jumped up and
That's Austin Nace.
Who is going to be that guy? And for me, Bijan Robinson is still going to be that guy.
Back to the ground with Robinson, who spins and then tries to bounce it. A stiff arm, another one as he rides it, keeps his balance. They're going to say he stepped out, but
I'm Felix Sharp. Jay, I know you didn't think that we would get through this episode without mentioning the name one Zach F. Wilson.
Screener draw. Oh, Wilson is going to uncourt for the end zone, and he drops it in beautifully. And it is his roommate, Dax Milne, on the touchdown.
That's Matt Bruning.
G. Scott Jr. Obviously, I waxed poetic about him on the last episode, so I won't do that again here.
And it's Justin Fields on the carry. Watch out. Justin Fields. Hello, Columbus. 51 yards.
Bruning, are you ready to go head-to-head with me?
I am.
Gotta get my popcorn out here. Hold on.
Gotta continue. I got. Kyle McCord is going to end up winning the job. He's going to be rated higher.
Well, I'm not nearly as passionate about what I'm about to talk about.
Our apologies because Herbstreit ran out of time. We'll get him rescheduled soon. And for Matt Bruning and Austin Nace, I'm Felix Sharp. Good night and good luck.
What's going on, everybody? We got another episode of the Devy Debate, a more probably relaxed version tonight. We're not going to have much animosity, no real arguing. A lot to go over, though, as the transfer portal hasn't officially opened. We've already had a ton of names entering. We're going to talk a little bit about Dane Brugler's 1.0 mock that he released earlier today, kind of the fantasy implications of those players as he has them being drafted. We will talk a little bit about the players in the transfer portal, and we're going to talk a little bit about lessons we learned this year. And I'm going to kick that to you first, Austin, before we jump into the questions we've got about that. What is one of the main lessons you learned here in the 2022 season?
I don't know shit.
I feel like that's all of us, but
what did I learn this year? I don't know that it's been long enough into the offseason yet for me to reflect on process errors. I've picked out some of the things that I got wrong. And I haven't quite figured out exactly how they all piece together yet. So my early answer to you as of today is that I don't have one. That doesn't mean there aren't any. And I will have some good ones, I'm sure. Maybe I faded some of your guys' opinions a little too much when I was accounting for my rankings. I know that's very weird to hear me say. Guys like ETN, guys like Judkins, those are the two that come to mind. Are guys that I didn't end up. Well, I have zero ETN. I have a few Judkins, but not as much as maybe I could. Because I didn't listen to you guys. So maybe that's my lesson.
So what you're saying is I'm a better salesman than Colin. I'll take it.
Colin probably made it worse every time he talked. Like, yeah, he's fat, but like,
that's true.
It's with a PH. Oh, no. Okay. No, not buying that. I don't know.
Chris, have you got any lessons that you've learned this year?
I think it's to not be overconfident with group of 5 depth charts. And depth charts in general, really, there were a lot of players that I was higher on maybe than I should. Yeah, just across both group of 5 and power 5. Like Chris Brooks was a guy I was very in on. Austin, you talked about him on Campus Life. Nathaniel P. at Missouri, another example. Like all of these guys were players I felt pretty okay drafting, and then it kind of fell apart. So I just don't want to be overconfident on depth charts moving into the season because there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong, but there's also a lot of value in it. So I don't want to overreact. I just want to. Here's how I want to handle it. I want to not take as much stock in players who I think are going to be really good. I want to take stock in players who I think are emerging. So Elijah Spencer overtaking Victor Tucker in Charlotte's offense, that was a real thing prior to the season. If you paid attention, you probably got some good value there. I don't want to overreact. It just the type of information you pay attention to is really important.
So I've got a couple. One of them I feel is almost the opposite of Austin's in trying to kind of trust my gut a little bit more and not let other people influence me, which I tend to do at times. There's some players that specifically in the freshman guide, which we have a couple questions on, I was higher on, but then I trust how smart, not to blow smoke, but you, David, Felix, Colin, Alfred, Alfred and me and our rankings are very different, but he does he hits on these 3 stars. It's not like he doesn't know what he's doing. So when you guys give these opinions and they're so opposite of mine, sometimes I'm okay, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just going to kind of revert to them. And I feel sometimes I probably should stand my ground a little bit more. My biggest one has been, and is not to be so reactionary to everything, which I feel I have done in the past. And I tried to pull that back this year. And I feel I have been, outside of Quinn, which part of that, if I'm being honest, was a little bit of a bit just to get on Felix's nerves because he would roll his eyes and get upset every time I brought him up. So I do it. But even with the Anthony Richardson stuff, Mox was with, I think it was just me and Moxley on that show where we talked about not overvaluing what happened in the Utah game, letting it play out. And he ended up turning around and having a good year. And we're all even sitting here still saying, there's still things he has to work on. But if he gets drafted in the first round, he does have some value, not riding the roller coaster that I think a lot of people do and trying to keep that steady heartbeat a la Bryce Young in every single game that he plays in and just kind of be let's give it more time. Let's see what happens before just saying this guy is QB whatever. And I'm very curious to see what people think about that because I feel that is most of the fantasy community. And I feel that's where I was getting in a lot of arguments this year on Twitter was people it was up and down. And if I was just no, let's give it time. And they're this, that. And I think a lot of that too, I know Colin does that with the quarterbacks a lot. And I feel you are definitely going to miss out on some opportunities if you do that. But I think you may end up being right more often than not. And that's kind of my big lesson I've tried to learn and implement this year.
Well, it's a really tough balance, right, Matt? In terms of being too, I mean, even guys that we've seen for 3 or 4 years inherently, that's not that big of a sample size for some of these guys. 30 games or 20 games, that's still not a lot in the grand scheme of things. And like you said, not all these guys are Bryce Young. They're just, kind of steady or Bijan Robinson or, some of these other guys that are just every week, no matter, you just pencil them in for 150 yards and a touchdown. They can't all be like that. So I think it is tough to not be especially in season where there's 60 games every weekend or 70 games every weekend. And we no person on the planet can in a week's time take all that information, pull out all the important stuff and filter out everything that's unnecessary and then make smart decisions and every decision be smart and informed. It's just impossible, which is why Felix talks about all the time. He likes the off season because now he can go back and now we can start getting our hands on a lot more all 22 and go back and see was that a good throw or was that just really stupid and it worked out for him? Was that a blown coverage? Jalen Hyatt will be an interesting one.
Yeah.
To really go back with all 22 and see what's going on with Jalen Hyatt. So I think I don't reactionary isn't necessarily bad. It's just hard to remain to be reactionary and still maintain consistent process throughout. It's impossible during the year.
That's actually a really good point to both of what y'all are saying. Being reactionary on a highly regarded player, I think, is a bad process. Saying, okay, this player had a bad 2 games in a row, 3 games in a row, do we need to denigrate him? That's what happened with Quentin Johnson at the beginning of the season, by the way. Like, he's a great example of people who just like overthought it. The other end is we should probably be more reactionary to players who we underrated or were generally underrated, I want to say, because I'm going to use Quinshon Judkins as an example here. Like, we should have been quick to react to a guy who was dominating like on an SEC offense. And like, yeah, he wasn't doing it in the SEC for the first couple games, but he continued to do so. So overreacting to players who are not as highly regarded, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do, and I think I've mentioned this on here before. It may have been on Better Sports when we were talking about just different players. I know it was based around the Anthony Richardson conversation and Quinn Ewers. It's like, whether people admit it or not, like, everybody has like inherent bias against certain players or for certain players. And it's like, even if you're sitting there saying you don't, like, there is subtle parts of that in everything that you do.
Yeah, I hate Will Levis. So
yeah, well, he's what I was going to bring up here in a minute. And like, so like, it's funny that you mentioned Judkins, because like, there were 3 people who were fairly high on him, and that was Colin, Felix, and myself. And so, like, when you went early on in the rankings after a couple, like, I'm almost positive all 3. I don't know about Colin. I know Felix did because we've discussed it. Me and Felix both had him up in like our top 12 running backs. So like, we had already reacted, but there were other people, as you mentioned, who were like a little bit more hesitant. It's like, well, should I wait a little bit longer? Which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. Like, yeah, you will miss sometimes on that, but I think a lot of that is you're letting the process play out a little bit. I mean, if you had moved Anthony Richardson up to QB3 after the Utah game, like, you looked kind of bad there for 6 weeks. I mean, it's go ahead.
Maybe this is a conversation about freshmen or redshirt freshmen or players who haven't seen the field previously. Because, like, we'd seen Richardson a little bit. Like, we kind of knew what he was about. We knew where we were to work, but we'd never seen Quinshon Judkins at the NCAA level. Like, so maybe it's a freshman question of, hey, players that we thought weren't like great or amazing or like high end guys, do we just move them up after we've seen a little bit? I tweeted at one point, or I don't know if I tweeted or I posted in Discord. I said, Judkins is just doing this against non-SEC opponents. Once it becomes the SEC, like, Evans will take over.
Well, Jarquez Hunter did the same exact thing last year.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's even hard to, like, you can't even come up with like a concrete rule there, because it's like,
it's a good point.
I mean, either you have Jarquez Hunter and Quinshon Judkins, or you have neither of the two, probably, because it's just like there's no hard and fast rules for all this stuff. It's
eat Arby's.
Eat Arby's. They're nihilistic Arby's.
So Noah, for the podcasting audience, who I know all 3 of us respect immensely, said the difference between producing well and playing well is relevant here, in my opinion. Production can be fluky, play generally isn't. Which leads me to something actually.
Film guy Noah, by the way.
Hey, those videos are great. Yeah. The Will Levis thing. None of us think he's going to necessarily be a very good quarterback. But I also think it is kind of bad process to us just completely write him off, because the one thing we've seen, there is a difference between the college and the NFL level. And he's already, so for those of you who may have missed it today, he announced he is going into the NFL draft. Would it be crazy for him to end up being a productive quarterback? Like, I do think it's on the lower end of spectrum for the outcome of his results, but it wouldn't be the craziest thing. It's the same thing I said about Anthony Richardson. Like, at this point, if he's getting round 1 or round 2 draft capital, like, why would you transfer? Why would you transfer and go to another college to try and learn a whole different offense, try and improve there while learning a new offense when you go into the NFL? I know we think at times we're the smartest people in the room. Those NFL people have those jobs for a reason, good or bad. Whether they're good or bad at their jobs, I can't imagine any of those guys are sitting there saying, we know we can draft Will Levis or Anthony Richardson today, and they're going to start for us week 1 in 2023. They're likely drafting those guys knowing their projects. Why wouldn't you want to just take a shot on them? I know I hate this argument as much as you guys do at times because of the tools, though. And if they are able to develop, like, you do have a good quarterback. So I don't think we should fade them completely. It kind of goes to what Austin said. Like, we've watched Will Levis play really for 2 years. He didn't play much at Penn State, but he's been in college for multiple years. And so you're looking at saying, well, we've seen him for all this time and we know he's not good. But you can make the argument that guys can improve when they get to the NFL level, which is kind of what my point was going to be, and like not trying to react so much to what I saw on the college side, because there were games that he played good last year, and I can't say how much of that was because of the injury this year, because it was a massive step back, if we're all being honest on what Will Levis did this year compared to last year.
So Levis is a pretty interesting comparison because I think there's a couple quarterbacks that probably sit in this bucket as well. PFF is hyping up Tanner McKee. And so, he's not the only toolsy quarterback being propped up by the media. If you're a Will Levis or McKee or Richardson truther, what type of quarterback are you trading for? Like, to put it into legit fantasy terms, like, where do you value them? Are any of them top 24 quarterbacks the second they step into the NFL? Because I find it hard to believe they are.
No, and if I'm being honest, the only one I would see getting there is Richardson. Will Levis is...
Yeah, his rushing upside.
Rushing upside, I think, is widely overstated. I do not think he's as good a rusher as they say. I know he had 500 yards rushing last year. He's not the athlete that Anthony Richardson. Neither is Tanner McKee.
Yeah, you ever seen the movie White Man Can't Jump?
Yes, I have.
That's the Will Levis story about his athleticism.
So Richardson's the only one that I would be willing to realistically take a bet on, but it also goes with Levis, going back to an argument Austin made, I think it was like 2 weeks ago on Devy Debate, like, is Will Levis kind of a buy right now? If they keep saying that he's going to be a first-round pick, because you'll find someone who, if he gets drafted by New York, and he goes with Brian Daboll, we've already seen the Josh Allen comps. Like, you'll be able to sell him for more. And I do not like playing fantasy football that way. I think, Austin, you're on that same space. Like, you don't like playing it like the stock market, and I get that. I don't either. But I just think it would be wrong to completely fade them in general, I guess was kind of my point there.
For the record, I think Anthony Richardson should be valued as a top 24 fantasy quarterback the day he hits the NFL, assuming that he goes where we think he's going to go. I would rather have him than Kenny Pickett. This is my whole thing about
sure.
Everyone thinks I hate Anthony Richardson. I don't dislike him. I think at cost, I really did not like him this year. I think he was being valued as something. You're valuing a guy that's never done it at basically what his ceiling probably was realistically, like fourth round of startups is where he was going a lot of the time. But I think like he's a solid player, and like I said, I would rather have him over at Kenny Pickett. I don't know exactly how high the line would go for me. Like if you listed out all the dynasty quarterbacks, and I had
you'd rather have him than Will Levis.
I would. Well, that was the other thing I've said. Like Anthony Richardson, I think coming into the year was like my QB 9 or something in all of college, and Levis was like 34.
Yeah,
like,
I didn't really.
Even though I've been critical of both of them, Anthony Richardson has just always been leaps and bounds ahead of Levis for me. Like I can't really name a thing that I think that Will Levis does well right now today. So
he looks good in shorts.
Mm.
So he does well. Like he's going really good.
I mean, he looks good in general. He's a good-looking dude. Like, let's just be honest. He's a good-looking guy. So my thing is, and it's a great thing about having someone here who's usually the loudest in the room and does get to draw a lot of attention to themselves. Is like, I actually can't speak for Moxley because I don't know about his rankings. None of us had Anthony Richardson that low. I believe he was my QB 6 or 7 coming into the season. So it's not like we were all super low on him. And as we talked about in that episode, the biggest thing was, I felt he needed to continue to progress as a passer, which I feel like is still played out. He's completing 55% of his passes. Like, that's not great, people. I'm sorry. It's just not. But he has improved, and that's kind of all we've all talked about. But because we've not sit there and said, like, put him up on a pedestal like 40-year-old virgin, you're putting the you-know-what up on a pedestal here, and you're not allowing it to get knocked down like that. I'm sorry?
Putting the passer on the pedestal.
You're putting it. But anyway, like, it's just a whole thing with him. Like, none of us hated Anthony Richardson. We just wanted to see him continue to have more time to develop. But I'm with you. Like, I would value him as a top 24. So I'll just really quick. Ryan Tannehill, Davis Mills, Andy Dalton, Russell Wilson, Matt Ryan, Jimmy Garoppolo, Jared Goff, Tom Brady, Jacoby Brissett, Tua. That's 16 through 24. Where would you draw the line for Anthony Richardson?
If Richardson got drafted in the first round, he would be above those guys.
I would
maybe not Russell Wilson, because I believe in Russell Wilson.
I think he has more upside than Tua, but Tua is in the perfect offense with the head coach that he's going to be married to for a while, with a couple of receivers that he's married to for a while that perfectly complement his skill set. Even though Tua is not like the ceiling player, I really like Tua for at least the next 4 or 5 years in fantasy. I think that's a speculative move that I would not myself be willing to make.
No, I agree with you. As much as I hate to admit that, because I do have a tattoo bet riding on Justin Herbert versus Tua, and things are not looking great because Tua has.
How many tattoo bets do you guys have?
I only have the one.
Holy crap!
Oh, I made another one today.
Oh, jeez. Chris is going to show up next year at the expo,
be like the lizard
Travis
dude
Parker over here, just tatted out everywhere.
Yeah. No, I made. What was the one I made today? I said if Braylon Braxton, the Tulsa quarterback, has 50 touchdowns in a single year, I'll get a back tattoo of Braylon Braxton.
No, I think you're pretty safe there. 50?
Fingers crossed.
I think you're safe there, although we say that, and we're going to be sitting here next year. But by the way, Braylon Braxton, QB1 and all of
61 touchdowns in the Western Kentucky offense.
I was going to say, Kenny Dillingham's really turned around the Arizona State, the Sun Devils here.
All right, so real quick, because I want to stick on the Anthony Richardson conversation, then real quick. Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, Daniel Jones, Trevor Lawrence, Marcus Mariota. That's 15 through 10.
Why is Mariota so? Oh, that's just where they're ranking on the season, right?
Yeah. That's just
okay.
Yeah, my bad. I didn't I guess I could have pulled up our dynasty.
Mariota.
I didn't really think about that, but I was just going based on like how they've played through this year for fantasy.
I'm also still surprised Mariota's ranked that high.
He had a couple big rushing touchdown weeks.
That's true.
Yeah.
I'll take him over a couple of those guys.
Yeah.
Derek Carr is the kind of guy that I think about. Because I think I know that Derek Carr is going to be an NFL quarterback for the next 4 or 5 years, whereas I definitely do not know that about Anthony Richardson. So it really depends on probably roster construction at the moment, which is such a cop-out answer, but it is what it is.
If Anthony Richardson goes... This is with the assumption that he goes around the NFL draft, right? Like,
I think even if he goes
late
second,
first.
I'd be willing to bet on him.
Third
round is where I would draw the line.
But so if I'm assuming that he's a first rounder, then I think he goes above most of those guys. If he's a second rounder, it's a little different because it depends on where he goes in the second round. Like if he's a high second rounder, it's a lot different than going like late second, because that means a team didn't trade up to get him. Like I think that plays into it a little bit. But if the second Anthony Richardson got drafted, like I don't want we're not haters. I feel like we've been branded as haters of Anthony Richardson.
We're reasonable people.
Yeah, we're just reasonable people who like value.
For reason in the fantasy football industry. It's
Felix isn't in here. He's gonna be so pissed we're not giving hot takes.
I know. he's already yelling at us through his TV, I'm sure. All right, so a couple of the questions here. For us, Nick Singleton was locked in at RB1. Do we, as the C2C family, still have very strong faith that he will remain there through his college career? I guess the easiest way to put, will he be the first RB drafted in his draft class?
Tough to guess where the NFL teams are going to take some of these guys. Felix was on with Waldman last week, Matt Waldman, I think. I finally got to listen to it yesterday, where they discussed for about the first 15 minutes of the episode, Singleton versus Judkins and kind of how they look right now for their freshman seasons. I actually I would way rather have Singleton than Judkins. Like, I know that the phrase "and it's not even close" gets thrown around. It's not close in my mind at all. And I actually think, much like we kind of cautioned last offseason that a couple of these guys might be sells, I think Quinshon Judkins is a sell this offseason. I think you can get a ton for Quinshon Judkins this offseason, who I think is a good player, but has been labeled as something that he is not currently. There are quite a few touchdowns that he's had this year where it is basically you could drive a truck through the hole. And that's, again, not saying that he is a bad player. But I still think he has limitations that Singleton, if he continues to figure it out as he kind of was figuring it out this season, I think the world is in trouble with Singleton, and I think Judkins is a good running back, and there's a gulf of difference between those two players.
Quinshon Judkins, could you trade him for Quentin Johnston right now? I think you could.
Oh, in a heartbeat. Yeah,
you do that. Quinshon Judkins or
I honestly think out of players that we are like for sure going back to college next year, if you take out Caleb Williams, if you take out Marvin Harrison, you might be able to trade him for anything else that currently exists in college.
God, that's such a mistake.
And I think
Quinshon Judkins or Braylon Allen.
I would rather have Judkins there, if I'm
Judkins.
being honest.
That's the kind of range that we're dealing with, though. Like,
I didn't want to say Braylon Allen when I was talking about players that we thought last season were sells, but yes.
Well, I said it for you because I knew that's what you were implying.
So he's the kind of guy that I think I'd actually rather trade him for an NFL player. Personally,
Judkins?
Yeah. Or even a Devy league. I have him in a Devy league. I'd rather trade him for some NFL talent. Yeah. I think you could get some very good NFL talent for him. Quinshon Judkins or like Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I really want to see what happens with the Jameson Williams return. Not to like get totally off topic, but
that was just the first name that came to mind.
I think Amon-Ra.
So my issue with that would be it would really depend on. The worst part about the C2C thing on that is like it really depends on where both of my rosters are, because I feel like Quinshon's going to bring me more value on my college side than Amon-Ra probably is on the NFL side.
Fair enough. I'm trying to think of somebody else.
Is Quinshon Judkins and Christian Watson even close?
Oh, I'd rather have Judkins. So what about this? If you're a contending team on the NFL side, would you trade Quinshon Judkins, say, for like an Alvin Kamara? Because I do think you could get
no, because I think, the problem, this is what happens when you try to pull these names out just on thing, because I picked out a player that has a lot of issues, and then you picked out a guy that might be in jail next year.
But if you're going for a championship,
these were not the best selections of names. If we had thought about this a little bit more.
See, I don't think he's valued as highly. I know he's having a good year. What about Nick Chubb? Would you do it for Nick Chubb then?
I would probably do it for Nick Chubb.
Because I would. Yeah.
And I'd much rather have Nick Chubb.
What about Saquon? I think you might be able to trade it for Saquon if the Saquon guy.
Yeah, much rather have Saquon.
Because people think Saquon's on the downslope, and I still think he's got a couple really good years left. That might just be me. But
No, I'm with you. Even if he doesn't re-sign with the Giants, like I think he's going to be fine moving forward, and I would rather take it. Because
somebody's going to pay up for the guy and then not use him.
Yeah, of course.
He's going to get used wherever he goes.
That's how it works. But at the end of the day, like, is anybody not in the Singleton is better than Judkins camp?
I mean, there are. If you just go search Twitter.
I mean, with us three.
So no. Singleton was by far, like, I think I still had Judkins as like RB 5 or 6. I did not have him that high. Now I would probably move him. I would move him over Blue right now because I just don't know what's going to happen with Blue. But then outside of that, like I'm looking at my rankings right now. Like I would have, I'd move him over Jamarion Miller, who was the only other one I had ahead of him, because I don't know that I can move him ahead of Citizen. Is the close one for me. I don't know if I want to move him over Citizen and make him RB3 for me in that class. He's not going ahead of Branson because I think Branson has a shot to still be as good or better, and I like being at Georgia more. And then he's not Branson going ahead of Singleton
right now, I think. But realistically, there's like a fairly decent shot that Branson looks just as good as he does next year, if not better. He looked good in limited snaps this year. Branson Robinson did. Like he looked a little svelter and quicker than I thought. They told him to stop lifting so much, I guess.
Where do you put him with Jaden Ott?
So far above Jaden Ott. I think my initial
you don't like Jaden Ott at all.
My initial opinion of Jaden Ott was correct, which is that he's going to be a pretty good college running back, but I don't know if he has a NFL skill set currently.
So this is an easy answer for me, but PJ asks in the chat, Quinshon Judkins or Rocket Sanders? It's Sanders for me.
Yeah, it's Rocket. That's easy for me too, by the way. Like just not even the same
I love
ballpark.
Quinshon. But yeah, like it'd be rocking. All right, so next question. Evan Stewart was wide receiver 7 for us in our freshman supplemental guide. And it seemed from everything we have talked about is that we were mostly hesitant about Jimbo, not necessarily about his skill and talent. How will we factor that into, say, these guys moving forward? Does that change anything for you guys seeing what Evan Stewart's been able to do? Like to, I guess, be able to thrive despite Jimbo in that offense?
100%. Like Evan Stewart and Moose Muhammad both getting on the field. Moose Muhammad's a second-year player, so it's a little bit different. But Stewart, third. Oh, he's a third-year player?
Yep.
Shoot. Stewart getting on the field as much as he did as a true freshman is like pretty impressive, which means he forced this coaching staff's hand. They had a couple injuries there, but that makes me feel substantially better about him than I did previously. Like I really liked him. Like I had him ranked pretty high as well. Like I don't know if he was my wide receiver 3 or 4, but I was pretty high on him, and I think you can feel really good about where you're at if you're Evan Stewart. And maybe he transfers. I don't know. It's certainly an option, but I mean, based on the season he had, you got to feel good.
I don't regret necessarily where I had him. I think in hindsight, there are a couple players I had ahead of him that I would bump. Like I totally missed on Keon Grays. I thought Grays would play.
We all did, if we're being honest.
I thought he by the end of the season would be playing like 15 snaps a game. I thought he'd be doing fairly well there. He was not. But then if I'm trying to pull up real quick like what I had as my 2022 rankings, like I would still take Barry and Brown over him. I'd still take Luther Burden over him. I'd still take Antonio Williams over him. I'm trying to pull up again who the other guys that I had in front of. Like
that's the only players to me.
A non-significant amount of the players I had ahead of him, I would still have ahead of him. I think they're better players.
The top 4 though is those guys.
Yeah. So
right? I feel like we've narrowed it down to those 4.
For me, so the ones that we had ahead of them, I'm with you on Burden and Barry and Brown. I know you and I want to say big wide receiver guy likes him a lot too. And we started going through the whole process. I don't remember, but I know you were high on him and Antonio Williams. Antonio Williams is close for me with Evan Stewart, but I would have Evan Stewart ahead of him. We had Adam Randall, DJ Allen, Barry and Brown, Isaiah Bond, Keon Grays, all ahead of Evan Stewart. I would move him ahead of all of those guys except for Burden and Brown for me. And I mean, I know I was driving the DJ Allen train, and that's got to have like gone off the bridge already. That's been a horrible call on my.
Oh yeah, you're in the canyon hole fire. Everyone's no survivors.
We got a long time ago, my friend. That train that was bad. But like even Bond, who I don't. There's really no one else I think you could put. Antonio Williams is the one I think is right there in the conversation with Stewart, based on the year that he had with a horrible Clemson offense as well.
Can you make an argument that Evan Stewart had a better season than Luther Burden and deserves to be ranked higher? Because I think you can't.
You can, but I still believe Luther Burden's the better player. And so for that part of it, I think I would stick with Burden. And the one thing I respect but hate is that he's not leaving Missouri. So I'm really hoping they get that quarterback room figured out or something. But like if you wanted to make that argument, like if we're being honest, you can make the argument of having Evan Stewart over Barry and Brown, who, I mean, he was electric in the return game. You can make.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I disagree. Barry and Brown has been substantially better beyond the line of scrimmage than Burton has.
I don't know about that. Outside of those 2 games, like he's been phenomenal as a kick returner, but I think you can make the argument Evan Stewart's had a better season.
I just wonder if we should be downgrading Luther Burden. I don't want to get us off topic, but like I think you can make an argument for 2 or 3 receivers above him. But here nor there, Brown, he's obviously still very good.
Evan Stewart, Antonio Williams, those are the only 3.
Matthew.
Yeah,
Golden?
it's a clear 4. Wait, who?
Matthew Golden.
No. Get out of here. Y'all are wild. And
I'm just trying to throw names out here.
I mean, he was a guy that we were high on as well.
Yeah. Austin, where do you have Burden right now?
Where do I have Burden right now?
Yeah.
Why?
With those 4.
Pull up so many spreadsheets. Right now, I know I have Burden as the number 1 in the class.
You still feel good about that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I have Burden at 7. I have him right in smack in between, like Egbuka, Burden, Downs, and Johnston are all together in a group. And I feel pretty comfortable with that grouping at the moment. Then I have Brown, Williams, Golden, and Stewart literally back to back to back to back right behind them.
Sounds about right.
All right, so this question kind of plays into the other one, or the one we just had about Evan Stewart. Dallin Hayden and Trevor Etienne were guys that we did not have highly ranked, not necessarily that we didn't like the players. Austin was very high on Dallin Hayden, talked about him, I believe, being like a tier 3, possibly even tier 2 running back, but we faded him going to Ohio State because of the depth chart. Obviously, it was a little bit different with Etienne, but that had some to play with that. How do we do that now moving forward compared to how do we compare depth charts compared to what we believe the talent of the player is moving forward?
Real quick, PJ asked, do you guys prefer Randall or Antonio Williams? This is a very unserious question. PJ, you know the answer, sir. And I have on good authority that you're trying to peddle Randall off onto unsuspecting victims for crap in return. So
yeah.
Stop it.
If PJ offers you a trade of Adam Randall, don't accept it.
Yeah. Straight up. I know everyone who listens to this podcast is in some sort of a league with PJ. So
yeah, he's only in like 85 leagues.
Don't do it. Don't fall for it. I like Antonio Williams more coming into the season, so you're gonna know my answer already.
Same.
But
Well, I think we all did except for 2 people. And Adam Randall was, I believe, my guide up. So
was he really?
yes. I won't name the person who did it, but yes, he was my guide up. He was in tier 2. Because I don't remember being high. Wait, I'm looking at it right now. Yes, he was. I can show you the sheet if you'd like. Because Barry and Brown was my guy up into tier 1, which you were 100% correct on. I guess we can't say he was wrong to be my guy up into tier 1. The injury, I'm sure, played a part in it, but
yeah, we did that before he had the injury.
Yeah, he was my guide into tier 1.
The vast majority of us preferred Antonio Williams. Some of us had Antonio Williams as wide receiver 1 in the class.
Who did?
I assume that was just Moxley. I assume that was just Moxley. I
did. I think big wide receiver guy did. I know Tim.
No.
Who did he have?
No. Big wide receiver guy preferred Adam Randall.
Yeah.
We had a whole discussion about this.
Okay. Sorry.
Because
Matt.
the joke was every time he mentioned Adam Randall, I dropped him 1 spot in my rankings, and I raised Antonio Williams 1 spot.
All right, Tim, who works with us and does some recruiting, he kind of does a whole bunch of data different stuff. He had Antonio Williams as wide receiver 1, and I did
Adam Randall. You mean? Yes, there was someone else as well, part of the freshman guide, who had Adam Randall as wide receiver 1.
Alfred.
Yes.
No, Antonio Williams. I had Antonio Williams. Tim had Antonio Williams.
No. I'm saying Tim did not. He was.
He didn't.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They were the 3 Randall guys that boosted him up in the guide. Because I don't think Felix was. I know I wasn't. He was like my wide receiver 10.
Are we allowed to expose who? Are we allowed to expose who the my guy was?
It was Alfred. I just said it. It's already out there. It was Alfred. Yeah.
You probably hit on like 4 other 3-star wide receivers.
Those were the 2 that got my guide up into tier 1. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's pretty much when we do that, it's you putting your process, I guess, in a way to the test and saying that you believe this guy does not belong in the tier he's in. He should go up 1 tier. We don't allow you to jump like 6 tiers, but you can move up 1 tier. As I mentioned, Austin did Barry and Brown. It's looking really good for Austin at the moment. And Alfred did Adam Randall into tier 1. If it weren't for those 2, we would have had 2 in tier 1, and neither one had, one had an okay season. The other did literally nothing. So are we at all worried? Yeah. Are we at all worried about the QB landscape heading into next season? Are we worried that we might see a repeat of the 2021 season? I think this is in a reference to, we were very high on guys like DJ and Spencer Rattler, who came off really good seasons. And we're seeing that right now with the likes of Caleb Williams and Drake May. And whether this is just my hive of bots that I have driving Quinn Ewers hype. Last mock I saw, he was still being drafted in the first round. Are we worried about driving these guys' value so high and then seeing a repeat of what we saw in the 2021 season with those guys?
No. I like Sam Howell and Drake May played for the same team, but they are categorically different quarterbacks. Drake May has size. He has better mobility, even though Sam Howell's tried to run. Caleb Williams is the best quarterback in the FBS currently. Like, those two elevate that class to such a high level that even if there's a quarterback 3 or 4 that emerge, like, it's such a good class. And I'm just not worried about it from that perspective. Like, Spencer Rattler showed holes in his game. Like, it was pretty clear he was kind of inconsistent despite having the physical tools. Sam Howell showed he was kind of inconsistent. He was kind of a weird situation. He's a smaller guy, like 6 foot. He allegedly had an injury that made him fall down draft boards. He probably would have gone higher. Like, I just wouldn't consider these classes the same just because you have 2 quarterbacks who I believe are locked in as top 10 picks. And I don't know that there's a lot that's going to get them off that trajectory.
I think there's still a couple quarterbacks left that we haven't seen enough of that I think could vault themselves into the discussion here. And the big one, well, there's 3, and I have them all side by side in my rankings currently. One of them is JJ McCarthy, who I don't know what to do with JJ McCarthy. I have no idea what to do with JJ McCarthy. Even after last week's game against Ohio State, I still have no idea. But the other 2 that I have in there with him, Preston Stone, I think is very sneaky. And then Mr. Kyle McCord.
Let's go.
I knew that would make Matt excited. We haven't seen enough of those 2 yet. If I had to bet, one from that group vaults himself into some sort of discussion. One of those 3.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I'm not worried about it. I could see JJ taking a step forward. I sent Austin a text. Of course, he never responded back to me. I was arguing with someone the other day. I guess we'll do it live here, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this too, Chris. We'll save it for a minute because it was involving Quinn Ewers and JJ McCarthy. I've said before that I think Kyle gets that job, and in that offense, despite what anybody thinks about it, and we have reservations. We've talked a lot about that with CJ Stroud. Like, he will produce, and I think he'll be fine. JJ, I think, could take a step to the next level. He does bring, obviously, some athleticism and his legs. Stone's an interesting one. I know that you've been high on him for a while. I honestly have not watched any, if he's even taken snaps this year, so I couldn't even tell you what he's looked like.
He looked good. That he broke his collarbone.
I didn't watch, so I can't speak to that, but I know you have been very high on him. I don't think we will see a downfall at all of this QB class because, if I'm being honest, the offenses both of those guys play in. I think the biggest issues, if you want to be worried about Spencer Rattler and DJ, is Mox mentioned the holes in Spencer Rattler's game. None of that changed that second year. Caleb came in. He got that job. Caleb's going to be fine at USC. He's producing. I think the comparisons to Patrick Mahomes should not be made personally. That being said, he's going to produce. He's a very good quarterback. I believe, still has some issues with some of his 50% completion games, but he's going to be a first-round pick. Would not be surprised if he's the number 1 pick in 2024. Like, I don't think there's even an argument for anybody else. And Drake May, I think, is going to be fine if Phil Long goes off. And so I don't think either one of those guys you have to worry about. Quinn, I do get the fear. I will be very curious to see if anything comes out this year about him dealing with an injury or anything like that. Because if you look at what he did in his first 4 games, he was very good and then just completely fell apart in the second half of the season after rumors spread that he was dealing with an injury. Whether or not that's true, we'll never know. So I can't say whether or not I still think he's going to be fine. I believe in the talent, and I believe, as I've said before, in Steve Sarkisian, which is why I believe in Quinn Ewers. Would you right now, Chris Moxley, take J.J. McCarthy over Quinn Ewers? Because that was an argument I had with someone the other day who said they believe J.J. McCarthy is the better quarterback, and this person could not find anything Quinn Ewers does better than J.J. McCarthy.
So I don't know who this person is, so I don't want to drag them.
I won't. I don't want to say names, so I'm not going to out this person. I'm sorry, Alfred.
Okay.
Listen, anyways.
Anonymous idiot number 1. We'll call them.
JJ McCarthy, as we sit here today, should not be drafted in the top 5 rounds of the NFL draft. You want to take a shot at him in the 7th round? Whatever. Like, do it. This dude does not have the skill set to be a competent NFL quarterback. Quinn Ewers does. He needs to improve, like, no doubt. But there's 4 quarterbacks I think that can be in consideration for first-round draft picks next year. It's him, Drake May, Caleb Williams, and Kyle McCord. That's it. Like, I don't know where another guy is emerging from.
Denzel meme of him touching his heart. Like, this is a great episode.
I've gotten on the Kyle McCord train as well.
This is going to be so bad if Devin Brown wins this job next year. This is just I'm going to have to quit the company. Like, we'll have to put my shares up for somebody.
I just don't see it from JJ McCarthy. Like, his performance against Ohio State wasn't even good. He just hit open dudes. They had 4 touchdowns, over 75 yards. Like, these were wide open scores.
No, it was 5. It was 5.
It was 5. Okay,
yes.
Sorry.
5 explosive touchdowns
over 75 yards, and I think one was like 8 yards or whatever, which was like the middle. And he could hit Cornelius Johnson basically behind the line of scrimmage. And then he hit him wide open with like 15 yards separation on the busted coverage. Like, I didn't learn anything from JJ McCarthy in his best game that I hadn't seen all year. Like, this is a dude who just doesn't have it, in my opinion.
Real quick, RJ, if you're still listening in, he said Bama is losing some big names. The ones that I've seen so far, I've seen Trayshawn Holden, I've seen Christian Leary. I don't think Bama's going to miss either of the, and Trey Sanders. I don't think Bama's going to miss any of those guys. Maybe there's a name that I have not seen yet, which is very possible. But I don't think Bama is losing anybody that should bring a tear to anybody's eye if you're an Alabama fan.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say on McCarthy, and we'll jump into the transfer portal talk. Actually, we'll save that last question for a different episode. I still think he is impressive. The one thing I think I want to say, Austin, you mentioned this on the Campus Live pod earlier this week. If you liked McCarthy, he's done nothing to show you that you shouldn't like him. And if you haven't liked him, I feel like he hasn't shown you anything to like him, if that makes sense. Like, he plays well out of structure, and I do feel like he did make some very impressive plays against Ohio State, rolling out right and left and making some nice throws or picking up plays with his legs. But yes, people overinflating that performance on him. Again, like the play to Cornelius Johnson, Felix said it on College Fantasy tonight, you would expect a high school quarterback to be able to make that throw. The other throw to Cornelius Johnson, he broke a tackle. It was a 10-yard throw. He broke a tackle and then took it another 60 yards to the house. Like, that's not J.J. McCarthy. That was Cornelius Johnson. The play to Loveland, the tight end, same thing. It was a trick play that got him out in the open. He was wide open. The linebacker was 5 yards behind Loveland. Any quarterback should be able to make that play. It's not saying that JJ is bad, but we can't overinflate that one performance that we need to see more out of him passing within structure, which, if you're being fair, is what Ohio State was trying to get him to do and beat, and he ended up doing that. Whether it was busted coverages or not, he did beat him throwing the ball, but that's why they played the defense they did. I'm with you guys. I don't think he showed enough there to like elevate him to like above Quinn Ewers personally. But I wanted to ask you guys that because obviously I would say my opinion on Quinn Ewers is skewed in the community. So that being said, transfer portal, RJ's Fishing and Outdoors talked about Bama. We've got some interesting names in there. Again, it technically opens up on December 5th, so we're 5 days away, 4 days by the time you listen to this on the podcasting side of things about opening. We actually have a tracker on the website, so you guys want to go college. Look at the top college guys. We do offense. We're doing just the offensive skill positions only. Campus2Canton.com. Look at it. It's free to look at. You can look. We've got all the top players. By tomorrow, we'll have the average points they scored as well in the 2022 season on there. The big name that stands out to me, and maybe that's because we expected him to be the guy at Oregon, is Byron Cardwell. But what about you guys? Is there a guy that stands out to you and like has entered the transfer portal and you have like a favorite landing spot you'd like them to go to?
Yes, but how deep do you want me to get?
You can go as deep as you want, my friend. This is college football debate tonight, so you can go full G5 if you want.
Full G5. Okay, I'm gonna go Division 2.
Even better, I guess.
Tight end. Kyle Morlock. This kid from Shorter, Georgia, might be legit. Like, so here are his offers. His offers, this isn't exclusive either. Just name the biggest schools. Auburn, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, LSU, Florida State, Tennessee, Oregon State. Not bad for a guy who is a 2-time All-American. I got to watch some of his film today. Really fluid mover, like an athletic dude for his size. He's 6'7", 250. Like, I'm pretty interested in this guy, Kyle Morlock, the tight end out of Shorter University, which is in like northeast Georgia. Sorry, got my waffles confused. Pretty interesting guy. Is all I will say. Like, that's the guy that I want to be drafting the last round of my supplemental in 2023. Told you I was going to get deep, but what do you want?
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a little deeper than I was thinking.
That's what she said.
Do I have a favorite player? Nobody asked me this before I came on. That's in here. I mean, I'm interested to see what happens with Dominic Lovett.
Yeah.
I think he's a big
Texas.
name. One of the top receivers. Do you think Texas?
Their report. So what I was told is Texas is pushing hard for him or Thornton, which I think is mostly because of the rumors we've all heard about Xavier Worthy leaving.
Cool with me. Just don't bring in too many guys. Jonte Cook's got to get out there as a freshman. But Lovett, I think, is an interesting guy. I think he's a good player. I don't know what his NFL value is going to end up being. But
I mean, I know Felix agrees with you because
yeah.
he talked about him being a guy who's going to have value was going to increase by this time next year, and then like a day later he entered the transfer portal. So,
What do y'all think about Ashton Hawkins?
I mean, that's my guy. I don't remember what we talked about on there. When me and Felix, it was you, me, and Felix were talking about something, and I brought him up as like a sleeper. I think it was a guy for you to grab at the end of your drafts, and you were like, yes, I like that guy too. And Felix was like, you're making names up. I don't know where he'd go, but I think he can be very productive.
He could be a Power 5 guy, right? Like, he was pretty productive this year in an offense that I don't think was particularly good.
Well, didn't they fire their head coach and their quarterback's
they
also
fired
leaving?
everybody.
So
Yeah.
I think that's a probably good indication things can go well this year.
I would like him in South Carolina. What it's worth.
Leave some subpar receivers for the rest of us, Chris. You already bring in all these other guys.
Okay, I tried to tell y'all about Juice Wells. Tried to tell y'all all offseason. Man's good. South Carolina knows how to recruit the transfer portal.
So there is one more name I want to bring up here really quick before I want to talk about Brandon Sanders' question in the chat real quick, and then we'll talk about the Dane Brugler mock and get out of here. Tyrese Chambers, who I know we've talked about in our Slack channel a little bit. I believe, Moxley, you brought him up saying that you thought he was going to be a really interesting name to watch where he transfers. I don't know if you've seen the prediction of his landing spot. Have you?
No, I hadn't.
Mississippi State. Do you think that's a good landing spot or no?
No.
Why would you leave FIU, presumably to increase your draft stock, and then go to a place that doesn't value their wide receivers at all?
That's exactly my point. So he's an interesting case because he entered the transfer portal last year and ended up withdrawing from it. Like he is a kid in Florida, so like I think he wants to be close to his child, and so like totally understandable, right? But he enters this year off like a season that was not quite as strong. I think he's a Power 5 wide receiver, but like he's going to be a 6th-year guy at this point. Like you're probably just looking at him from a CFF perspective. Like Jaquan Burton is the guy you probably are more interested in those Florida teams. Like I just don't know if I have no idea what to think about this transfer. Like I really liked him last year, and I just feel a lot like very let down.
I mean, and for what it's worth, as Mox mentioned, you can withdraw that and go back. This is not a guarantee that they're leaving their schools. They're just putting their name in the portal. So we will see what happens with them. So Brandon asks in the chat, He wants to talk about the Heartline to Cincinnati talk. For those of you who don't know, he is interviewing for the Cincinnati head coaching job tomorrow. He says, and taking half of the Ohio State receiver core with him, most likely. Please debate. If he gets the job, it is not surprising to me at all. I believe Felix didn't understand this talk when we brought it up. Me and Mox did. Like, he's going to get it. I've said he's going to get a head coaching job. I believe I said I thought it was going to happen this year. So if it happens, great. Like, I don't think he's a guy that's going to go and call plays. He's likely going to be a CEO type. He'll bring in coordinators to run the offense and defense. He'll recruit and develop wide receivers. I think he'll be fine there. If he takes half of the wide receiver core, I mean, I honestly don't care. Like, they're bringing in 3 really good wide receivers. Like, you can take Keon Grace, Caleb Burton, Caleb Brown, whoever the guy is we don't like. Like, he can take them with him. I don't care. Like, good luck to you in Cincinnati. Yeah, Kojo Ant, we like good luck to him. Like, I'll still root for Keon Grace. I think he's a good wide receiver. Like, I don't think it matters. Like, they want to follow him, great. I know there's a lot of hope that Devin Brown. I don't think Devin Brown's going to Cincinnati personally, but if he does, good luck.
Can I just toss that real quick because we've talked about this before on the show that I actually think Brian Hartline to Cincy would be a disaster. I don't know why he would do that.
You think he's weighing out for a better job?
There is no better job. He went to Ohio State. I don't think he's a good enough coach to be a head coach. This would be a very difficult way for him to discover that fact at a program that now expects you to be contending for a top 10 spot every year because of what they've done the past couple years.
I think
terrible.
I do think the expectations are going to be lower, though. Like, they're joining the Big 12.
They will.
They're joining the Big 12. Like, they're not in the AAC anymore.
That's more money, more resources, baby.
I think for Brian Hartline, though. Like,
yeah, I think the expectations will be lower because Luke Fickell won't be there as well. I think the expectations are there because Luke Fickell's there, and if he gets it, or I know Dion's in the running for it as well, I don't think the expectations, at least year 1 or 2, will be there that they need to be a top 10 team. Where I disagree with, I don't know what Hartline is as a coach. He's a position coach. I can't say that he's going to be a good or bad head coach because we've seen guys like, I'm just going to throw this out there. Granted, it has not been good so far. Dabo Swinney is not a coach of any sort. He is a CEO who runs that program. He doesn't call plays. He doesn't call offense or defensive plays. He brings in guys to do that. If Brian Hartline takes over the head coaching job, he's never once said he wants to call plays. He develops one position, the wide receiver position. He's a good recruiter. He doesn't just recruit wide receivers, so he is very good at that. They send him out to recruit running backs. He recruits defensive guys. He knows how to recruit. If Hartline goes to Cincinnati and plays, as I just said, the CEO type, brings in a good offensive and defensive coordinator, then I don't necessarily know that he will be bad at the job. Now, if he goes into Cincinnati and says, I'm going to be the one calling offensive plays, yeah, I'm going to be a lot worried about what Cincinnati's going to do. I don't think he has that. The one thing I will say is if he does fail, regardless of who the coach is at Ohio State, I think he will always have a spot to go back to there. So I think if he's got like the permanent wide receiver coach job at Ohio State, Days there or whoever, like if he fails at Cincinnati, I think he would easily be able to just come right back to Ohio State if he wanted to. He is going to get an upgrade at some point, whether Cincinnati, TBD. But at some point, he's going to be probably a group of 5 coach or a borderline, like a Big 12 new addition coach, which is what Cincinnati is. He's going to be head coach at some point. So we're going to see it happen. I don't think Cincinnati's a bad spot for him though. Why not let him try it out there? I don't know. I'm just not that down on them hiring him. And they're not going to hire Dion, by the way. I've seen a lot of talk about this. Dion and Cincinnati aren't just not a good fit. That's not going to happen. He's going to take South Florida over Cincinnati, by the way. I'm very surprised that that's an actual discussion that's happening. Neither here nor there, but yeah. All right, so real quick, Dane Brugler, he released his 1.0 mock on The Athletic today. We're just going to stick with the fantasy relevant guys. So I'm gonna read the names here, and then I guess we can just kind of discuss the names here a little bit. So he has at the number 1 pick overall, Bryce Young going to Houston. At number 5, CJ Stroud to the Carolina Panthers. At 11, the first wide receiver off the board being Quentin Johnston to the Jacksonville Jaguars. At 14, he has Will Levis coming off the board to the Indianapolis Colts. At 18, Jordan Addison to the New England Patriots. This is extremely intriguing to me. At number 21, he has Bijan Robinson coming off the board to the Baltimore Ravens. 23, Michael Mayer to the Bengals, which I absolutely love that landing spot. 26, Darnell Washington to the Titans. 29, Jackson Smith-Njigba to the Minnesota Vikings. At 30, Jalen Hyatt to the Kansas City Chiefs. And then at 31, Jahmyr Gibbs to the Eagles. The only other player worth mentioning, Devin Achane, he has going with the Miami Dolphins' first pick in the second round. No Hendon Hooker, no Anthony Richardson in the first 2 rounds as of right now. So, Moxley, we can't really talk about those guys. I'll come to you, noted Will Levis hater. If he goes 14 to the Indianapolis Colts, what are you doing with Will Levis?
I'm probably treating him the way I do now, right? Like a late first, early second super flex pick. I think that's fair, right? Like I'm not going to just fade a quarterback because I don't believe in him, especially if he's going to be available at like 110. Like super flex quarterbacks are still valuable. I don't like Will Levis. Like I have been on record, and I think we've all been on record at some point saying that we are skeptical of his upside, but I'm not going to fade him in his entirety if the NFL says, okay, like we think this dude can play. That is my thought on Will Levis. I'm glad that I actually think Brugler's mock is the best mock that I've seen through like the whole draft process. Like a not top 10 Will Levis and Stroud and Young both above him. Like I can work with that. It's a good mock on aggregate.
Problem with Indy as a landing spot is we don't know who the coach is going to be there.
Yeah.
And realistically, you have Jonathan Taylor at running back, and then you have Pittman at wide receiver. And then it's a lot of question marks. Like Pierce had those 1 or 2 games, but overall he's not been that great this year. Paris Campbell is what he is at this point. I know people are hyping up the tight end that they took.
Kyle Granson.
No, not Granson. The kid they took out of Virginia this year.
Woods.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Johnny Woods.
Johnny Woods.
I don't think he's a thing
year.
at the moment. So like I don't know what's there that's going to help Will Levis at the moment. It's a very average group of weapons.
Yeah, I wouldn't hate the landing spot because Indy cannot get out of that contract from Matt Ryan, so I don't think Will Levis starts right away. So you're going to have time, I guess, to build around him. But I do think there's some serious questions. I actually don't think Chris Ballard will be there anymore as a GM either. I think he's likely going to be fired. So you're probably looking at a brand new GM, brand new coach in Indy. It's going to be very interesting. Addison to the Pats.
I hate it.
Hate it.
He's so much better than that.
I was going to say the same thing.
I would kill him.
Even if Tom Brady goes back to New England, as the rumors are stating now.
As what? Like the Mummy? Like he's
look, dude's still out there. He's still playing. He's still the GOAT. So, all right. So we hate that. All right.
The two I hate are Addison and Bijan suck. I hate both of those landings.
Bijan's horrible. Yeah. That doesn't make any sense to me. Baltimore doesn't need another running back, and I don't know why you bring in Bijan there. I think it's a lot more likely he goes to the Eagles, for what it's worth. I feel like he was just trying to fit Bijan in somewhere, so he put him there. I don't think
you're the Ravens. You would rather have like Jalen Hyatt, whose ceiling is like what Hollywood Brown was there. Like his absolute best case scenario. And even if he's not, he would fill that role. I mean, look at what they have now to catch passes. Like Lamar has not been good, but look at what he's throwing to right now. He's throwing to the ghost of Mark Andrews, who is clearly injured. Rashad Bateman has been injured. And then it's, God help him. I kind of liked him coming out, but it's like the next best guy is Devin Duvernay.
Yeah.
Like they could use a guy like Andre Iosivas.
Go give him the next Randy Moss.
Yeah, the next Randy Moss, Quentin Johnson, Mike
Harvard,
Mallory was
Harvard Randy.
Yeah. What about Jahmyr Gibbs? You mentioned you'd rather see Bijan go there. They have him going there to the Eagles. I don't think it's a horrible fit. They're probably going to move on from Miles Sanders this year. I mean,
they've shown willingness to throw the ball to the running backs, but not necessarily Miles Sanders. I think that if they had a guy who could do both, they'd be in better spot. I'd much rather see him go there than any running back go to Baltimore, to be fair. I think Jahmyr Gibbs, wherever he goes, actually is going to be a good fit in the offense. Like he's pretty scheme. Like I say, he's scheme versatile as a guy who's like a pass catcher and like undersized. But I really believe that. Like I think he could be an extension of a passing game for a lot of different teams. Like Bijan, I feel the same way about for different reasons. But I think Jahmyr Gibbs has kind of elevated himself to that level.
I know you weren't saying that as a blanket statement, but I disagree. He will not be that good on every team, but I get what you're actually saying on Jahmyr Gibbs. Like if he were to go to the Browns, I would hate that for Jahmyr Gibbs personally.
Oh, of course. If he goes to the Browns, I would be very unhappy.
I'd love it just because I get to throw that in Felix's face all the time because he's not going to ever get to that fantasy one ceiling he thinks he's going to get to, but I don't think that would be a good landing spot. But I do like the Eagles one. Michael Mayer is one I wanted to touch on because I think that would be a phenomenal landing spot, not just helping pass block for Joe Burrow if Joe Mixon's still there and healthy, helping there, but also gives Joe Burrow another amazing weapon in the passing game. If Mayer were to go to the Bengals, Austin, how high would you be willing to draft him in a rookie draft?
So doesn't this kind of hurt Mayer though, because there's really only so many targets there? Like what was
so you would think so until you see how good of a season Hayden Hurst is having, and then you're like, is Michael Mayer? I don't think he's worse than Hayden Hurst.
What are Hurst's splits like with the gang versus without the gang?
So I can pull that up really quick, but he was fairly productive even when Jamar Chase was out there, and I actually don't think he's been much better since Chase has been out, but I will pull it up.
Andre Perine been the main beneficiary of
so since Chase has been out, he has been getting 7, 3, 8, 4, and 5, while Chase was there 8, 7, 2, 4, 7, 3, 7. So he was still getting targeted fairly heavily when Chase was playing.
Hold on.
He's a much better player than Hayden Hurst is.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So where would you take him?
I could live with it. I mean, just out of principle, the matter, I couldn't take him before like the 108, 109, even if it's tight end premium. He's just not that level of player.
Moxley, noted tight end lover. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I tend to agree. So like, he's clearly going to go in the first round. Like he's the best tight end in this draft. I think by a good amount. He's Zach Ertz, though. Like that's his upside, and I don't think that's a bad thing to say either.
No,
like Zach Ertz had multiple top 5 seasons, and top 3 seasons. It's not a bad comparison. Like people are like, "Ooh, Zach Ertz." Like he was a league winner for multiple years. I don't want to act like that's a bad comparison, but that's who Michael Mayer is. And so I think at 109 between 112, like you're getting a good player. There just could be a lot of skill position players who go in the first round. Just what it is.
Yeah, I mean, if we're being honest, Zach Ertz probably could have been a league winner for more had he not been injured in multiple years as well. Like, I don't think that's a bad comparison at all. PJ asked, where did Kayshon Boutte go in the mock? He did not, at least the part that I read.
Not the first round.
He did not release the entire second round. He just released interesting picks he thought he had in the second round. The only offensive skill player was Devin Achane to the Miami Dolphins. He did not have Boutte on there. So I don't know. I would assume as we get further into the offseason, he'll expand those a little bit more, and we'll see where he has Boutte going, but he did not go in the first round.
That's the only fit I actually really like. That's a fit that I think could be good. Yeah. Now, I'm not like a Devin Achane guy, but like that outside zone is exactly what Achane probably needs to succeed at the NFL level.
Not only that, I think he just fits what Mike McDaniels wants to do with that offense, with all that speed. The only thing that would worry me about, well, I guess it wouldn't worry me because Raheem and Jeff Wilson have both been very good, but like he's never going to be at least in that offense, I don't think he'll ever be the workhorse, quote unquote. Like he won't be the lead guy, but I think he'll produce enough for you. Like he'd be a guy I'd actually probably take Chain at like 112 if he went to the Miami Dolphins, assuming he lasted that long. I don't know. Obviously, depend on like where Boutte and some of those other guys go.
It's a good landing spot.
Well, that will do it for us today, guys. Make sure to tune in Saturday. Better Sports. At least 3 of us will be there from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern. We're going to have Alan True on with us to talk a little bit about recruiting and the Michigan program. Felix believes Jim Harbaugh should be fired. I'm going to argue why he shouldn't, which is just the weirdest irony of all things, but that is what it is. And then at least Felix and myself will be on the tailgate to just kind of preview championship weekend as well. So make sure to join us all day Saturday. Obviously, we've got everything else coming out. I'm sure Canton Bound will be out tomorrow. Back to Devy dropped today. It was a really good episode. Check that out. And outside of that, everybody have a great night. Talk to you guys again next Wednesday.